a champion. This is me, I still on it, 'cause you all wanna be loved, and you all wanna be loved.
Hey, and happy hump day. Happy Wednesday. We're so blessed to have y'all here. Look, we want to apologize. We definitely had to wait until everyone got here before we started. So we appreciate those who have who have stayed on, and those, who are new here. We know that we've been gaining traction over the last season. We're pretty new here. This is the Crimson Dynasty, and we're essentially the sister channel of the Bama Standard Network, which I know a lot of you are familiar with. So I'm your host, Sishi, and we do have a couple guest hosts as well. And so they're actually more permanent. I don't know if they know that yet, but they've been here literally every single week. So I'm trying to get them to just stick with it. So I know that the football season is over now, but we're still in the news like pretty much every single day. So before we get started, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Workspace Solutions. So if your business needs a digital presence or a marketing team at an affordable price, be sure to check them out. We actually have their website at the bottom. Contact them, let them know that we sent you there, and I'm sure they'll be able to hook you up. So like I mentioned, I'm the host for the Crimson Dynasty, and we're excited about tonight's show. We actually have some great topics, and we actually have a really awesome guest that we're going to introduce in a minute. But before we get started, like I mentioned, we do have our co-host on. So I'll start with Dan James the fourth. Make sure you remember the fourth. So he's
a bunch of us.
Yes. So a part of the Bama Standard Network, we have a few shows, and one of those shows are the Final Whistle. So it comes on every Tuesday night. And so Dan is the lead recruiting analyst for the Final Whistle. So any questions that you have about recruits, he's your go-to guy. He's awesome. He's hilarious without even trying. So he's one of my favorite guys on the Bama Standard Network. Now, I also want to mention our other co-host, yes, Hannah Stevens. So she's been on the last few episodes, and she's added her own touch, her own flavor. Now, she has a sports broadcasting background from Alabama, and she has a show on ESPN Radio in Huntsville, Alabama. She has some podcasts. So she's doing everything, and she has very extensive knowledge, not just on football, but other sports as well. So we'll get to her as well. But I also want to introduce our guest tonight. It's our NFL agent. He's actually a huge fan of the Crimson Dynasty, so it's just a blessing to have you here. This is Spencer Charles III, so make sure you get the third as well. Now, Spencer Charles, so he's actually with Agency One Sports. So that's essentially a full-service sports representation firm. They represent a lot of collegiate athletes, not just Alabama, but across the board. And the way that they hook these guys up, I mean, they're literally taking them to the next level and beyond. Now, Spencer, I believe DJ Dell, is he one of the newest guys with Agency One?
Yeah, he signed with us last year, so he was part of our our 2023 class. And then this year, probably the biggest fish we got, which I won't get too deep on the road in that, we signed the Heisman Trophy winner, JT Daniels.
Okay. Awesome. That's really dope. So, and just for those who may be a little bit newer to the fan base, DJ Dell was one of our defensive linemen not long ago at all, and he's now with the Buffalo Bills. So that's one of the names that a lot of us remember. He was very impactful for Alabama, and I think with you getting Daniels from LSU, that's huge. So hopefully that goes through and everything, is official there. But we definitely, I know that we're a few minutes behind, but we had some questions that we wanted to ask, and we tried to prepare them in advance just so that you're not caught off guard. So I'll kick it off, and then I'm going to, throw it to you so that you can answer, and then we'll rotate in our co-host. So my first question essentially is, how do you advise collegiate athletes as they prepare for the transition to the NFL, both on and off the field?
And I love this question, and I'm going to kind of throw an opening statement out. So part of the reason I wanted to join your show is you hear the term agent all the time. So I wanted to kind of put a voice in the face with some of us on the other side of the fence. But as far as advising college athletes, let me kind of level set. So number one, from an NFLPA perspective, a potential NFL draft prospect has to be 3 years removed from high school. So that's number one. So if you're not 3 years removed from high school, you're not a candidate for the NFL draft. So when I sit down with guys and you hear a coach talk about, or I say Coach Saban, who just retired, creating value for yourself. And that is an accurate statement. That's how the NFL looks at it, that's how agents look at it. So number one, okay, are you a multi-year starter? Yes or no? So the more boxes you can check kind of determines if you're a good candidate. You're a multi-year starter. That's number one. Number two, do you play in a Power 5 conference? You don't have to come from Power 5. Well, here's why it's important. Roughly 75% of the guys in the NFL come from Power 5 schools. That's your Alabama, your Georgia, your Michigan, so on and so forth. Number 3, do you have distinguishing stats? 1,000 yards receiving, 1,000 yards rushing, things like that. That's another box you check. Number 4, do you have the ideal height, weight, size from an NFL perspective? That's another box you check. And then if you can say yes to all those things, and here's kind of where I say I partner with schools. Schools like Alabama, since this is a Bama Standard sister show, the school goes to the NFL. They have something called NFL Draft Advisory. They submit the paperwork, and they'll get a grade back that says first round, second round, I go back to school. So how do you grade out from that, right? So that's another variable. And then someone like a Coach Saban or a Coach Smart, what's their feedback, okay? And then the last piece is agents do build relationships with players throughout the season, throughout the years. What's the feedback, we get from teams as well? So when we sit down, it's kind of an aggregate of all those data points. The more boxes you check, you have a higher probability of being successful going to the league. And personally for me, if you don't come back with a first or second round grade, I tell guys to go back to school. Because the thing about it is the average guy has a 3-year career, and then 75% of the athletes are broke within 3 years, their career is over, and then you're 27, 28, and gonna live another 50 years. So then what?
Wow, that was an awesome. And honestly, in what you just said, I just learned some things. So, I mean, and I'm sure that what you're saying is going to be highly beneficial because we know that some of the players watch the show, even people from other schools. So I think that this is awesome that you're sharing this level of insight. Now, Dan, I'm going to kick it to you. Was there anything in specific that you wanted to ask Spence?
Yes, Spence, tell us, give us a little background of how you started.
So interesting, and I'll try to be short. So I walked on at a school here in Atlanta. I'm based in Atlanta. I'm from California. Didn't work out in college, and then I kind of forgot about it. Actually, a little city called Kennesaw, Georgia, which I just tell people marry when I travel. But yep. But I forgot about sports, and kind of got tired of the corporate stuff. And then I had a friend of mine ask me to come coach her son's middle school team. I turned it down. She called me again. She's like, "We need coach." I said, "All right, I'll do it." Went out there. Fell in love with coaching. I coached middle school football, won a state championship. I was like, man, I think I want to do high school. Went to high school, started coaching varsity. And I was like, man, I kind of want to work with – I know I couldn't coach college because college, you kind of got to start young, and then you're living out of boxes and moving around and getting fired. But long story short, I started doing some research, and I looked at the requirements to be in the NFL because like any aspiring athlete, you want to be a pro athlete. I always want to be in the NFL. So one day I just started looking around. I was like, you know what? I still probably could be part of the NFL, but I'm gonna have to put a suit on. And this is what I go around talking to the universities about. So when at the NFLPA website looked up the qualifications, which you either have to have a law degree, which most folks think you have to have a law degree. That's not necessarily true, or you have to have your master's. So long story short, I went and got my master's in sports management, paid, I think the test just to put some of this information on was about $2,500, studied my butt off for like 6 months, and then flew to Washington, D.C., took the test. And then I kind of went from there. I started off as an independent. This is important to know for anybody who wants to get into business on the agent side. Most big agencies, unless Derrick Henry is your cousin you went to Alabama with, or Cam Newton's your cousin, are not going to sign you. So I got a guy that came out of Valdosta State, was kind of like a diamond in the rough. He ended up, we ended up getting him with the Kansas City Chiefs the year they won the Super Bowl, and then my career kind of took off from there. And then agency one came knocking about 2 years later, like, okay, you kind of proved yourself. We'd like to give you an opportunity.
So they essentially saw you out. Sounds like.
Yeah, the agent in the sports business, you kind of same thing with college football. You got to kind of prove yourself, unless you have those relationships or you have a relationship with a big time player coming out.
Oh wow! Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's similar. Only one thing kept me out the pros. It was talent.
Well, you need that.
Well, I'm sure you're talented in something. So, I'm sure you're talented. You can go pro in something, though. So.
No, he's naturally funny, though. He could definitely be a comedian. No, that was a great question, Dan. Hannah, what do you have for Spencer?
Yeah, so obviously, this is a very intriguing topic, and I love that you came on because I feel like this is kind of a missing gap, right? Like always hear from the professor. Sometimes you want to hear from the student, right? Vice versa. But for me, I think one of the things I've always wanted to know, because obviously I come from not being a football player, obviously, but I covered sports. So I would go to these events, interview players. But from your perspective, twofold question. First off, how important do you think the NFL Combine actually is for athletes? And secondly, what is your opinion? Obviously, I think it was Athletes First. They obviously announced that they're going to tell their players not to take the cognitive exam. So the first question is, what's your opinion on the combine itself? And then secondly, what is your thought? Obviously, Bryce Young scored exceedingly high and CJ Stroud scored exceedingly low. What's your opinion on the cognitive part of the combine as well?
So I always like to put information out there, educate. So number one, the combine only invites 255 players each year. And you think about it, you have thousands of college players, D1, D2, right? So only 255 are invited. And here's another thing from an information standpoint, you have to be invited. Agents, not even Coach Saban, the GOAT could get you into a combine. So for me, I go back to what I said, any data point is going to help you, get an extra buck. So to me, I think there's value in, you have all NFL teams there, you have most of the GMs there, you have a lot of the owners there. So it's essentially a big job interview. So maybe I played at, Alabama here, we're just going to stay in our backyard, but you have the LA Chargers who don't necessarily recruit, the South as much. I mean, they have scouts or whatever, but it's my chance and they need an outside linebacker. And let's just say I'm a, Will Anderson, right? I was already seeing that guy, but that's another chance on a bigger stage. It's a bigger platform for a big job interview. So for me, it's an advantage. Let me back up though. Sometimes it can be a disadvantage. If I'm a speed guy, if I'm a Jerry Jeudy or Henry Ruggs, right? I'm a speed guy, but maybe I got hurt or I'm injured. I might or one might advise your client not to run because that negative data point. If for a receiver, if you run slower than 4.5, it's going to hurt your stock. So what's best for the client is he probably doesn't need to run. Or let's say I'm a receiver and I'm not fast at all, but turn on the tape, I'm catching everything like Randy Moss and Jerry Rice, right? So maybe I don't run the 40. So it's kind of a subjective kind of disposition on if you should or should not work out. But at the bare minimum, I do think you should do the interviews. Because you go in the room with the teams, the GMs, the coaches, you do the whiteboard with the plays. They ask you questions, why did you get in a fight in 11th grade in Miss Johnson's classroom? What went into that? They may ask you about your, there was something controversial that came out about a player's mom and, her life, but they put you in these pressure situations because they're about to invest 20, 30 million into you, right? So they want to know what type of person am I getting? Do you understand the game? Do you love the game? So I would say the bare minimum, the interviews are very important because it gives you that bigger platform, the extra data point. So I'll kind of pause before I kind of get to the cognitive test.
Sure.
Y'all have any follow-up questions?
It looks like Justin may have had one. Justin, does yours tie into this or?
Well, it kind of ties into you're talking about being an advisor and trying to give them a realistic view of what to expect. Should you stay or should you go? And I don't envy you at all because now it's even harder to kind of make your voice be louder than all the outside voices. You got social media, you're taught that your brand over everything. You've got family members now just trying to jump in and chirp about how great you are but really their motivation for that is not exactly for their best interest. It's more for their monetary gain. So how do you keep these guys grounded and keep that realistic thinking in their mind? And then two, how do you make your voice louder than all the outside noise?
It is tough. Like you said, there's a lot of noise. There's this thing called NIL. And I'm going to touch on that just quickly. Before, you had guys that never had a dime, right? So they're just appreciative to be a part of the process, go to the combine, go through the draft process, right? But now you deal with guys in college that have more money than you. They got $1 million in their pocket, right? They have advisors, they have other agents you're competing with, they have social media, the big man on campus. So for me, in my style, and I would even say my firm agency one, we're big on relationships. So, I started to try to get to know guys and earn their trust. And everybody says it's in this business, but I'm a former high school football coach, grew up in a single parent household. So a lot of my coaches were like surrogate fathers to me. So I try to develop relationships early on before they become that guy and they get all this NIL money. And then number two, I believe it takes a village to raise, like a young man, because these men are essentially going to get out of a fishbowl from a college and get into a big Shark Tank, with millions of dollars, everybody pulling on them. Mm-hmm. So I said it to say, from a village perspective, I usually try to partner with the mom or the dad. My very first client, the guy that made it with the Chiefs, me and his mom had a very close-knit relationship, and she was his business manager. So, if I delivered a message a certain way, he didn't receive it, maybe the mom could. So forming a partnership with the family, forming a partnership, if I can at times, with the coaches, because ultimately guys are only going to listen to you. One, they got to think you're credible, right? That's just the nature of the business. Like, who do you work with? What do you guys do? But then two, do I really feel like you have my best interest at heart? Do you really trust me? Can I have you around my family? So for me, it's really about the relationship, and then trying to be a part of that village, either with the coaches, the mom, the dad. Those are some of the things, but it's still tough, to your point, because of all the distractions now that's going on in the business.
Right.
Awesome.
And then I think, Hannah, you had something.
Yeah, I want to piggyback off that if I can, because I think something that I've always felt was, and I think NIL's kind of made this much more apparent to people, is the money, right? Especially when you have kids that, because I feel like college was kind of a safeguard for them for years prior, when they came from nothing. At least college, like, it was kind of, they knew what the NFL was for, right? That was, they were going to work hard and make it to the next level. But now that they're getting paid there, it used to be when they made it to the NFL, you would have to struggle with them, not spending all their money, or, all 5 million people they know are like all of a sudden wanting money from them, right? So how do you as an agent handle that? Because I feel like as a female, we get it. It's more of the emotional, like, that those stories really burden me, is when you have athletes who are first round picks that lose all their money within the first couple of years because of that. So what do you as an agent do, whether on this college level now where they're making all this money, or in the next level once they get their check they've been dreaming for?
So number one, it's really understanding for me, and I studied the GOAT, Coach Saban. He says all the time, he has a guy when he comes in the building, what are your goals? Every guy says NFL. Most guys say, I want to play in the NFL because, I want to create wealth, take care of my family. Okay, that's your goal. Okay, so people don't plan to fail, they fail to plan, right? So let's develop a plan so that you can keep this money. And I always start with like fact-based, like, leadership. So one thing I do is we start off this conversation, I said, do you understand the average guy plays NFL 3 years? And no guy thinks their career's going to end in 3 years, but just the average guy plays 3 years. Average guy is going to probably make somewhere about $5 million. It's taxed at 40%. You got, attorneys, agent fees. So now you're out of the league in 3 years. You got $2.5 million. You bought your gold chain. You bought your house. You took care of your homies. You down to $1 million, right? So how do you want to live long term, right? How do we plan that? So then we start looking at the type of career they want to have on and off the field. Then off the field, it's like, how do you want to diversify your portfolio? And that's where usually we bring in like a financial advisor. Technically, agents, we cannot work with players and financial advisors until they become pros, right? But let's just say, like Terry Under Armour, right now, he's getting ready to go through the process. We would get him a financial advisor. We talk to him about his goals, his career longevity. Then we bring in a financial advisor, and we start talking about diversifying his portfolio, from whether that's a 401k, some of those different investment tools. But then also, getting them into different off the field types of businesses, because wealth or generational wealth is created through multiple streams of income. And I'll say this, in the minority culture, there's a disposition of, once we get to the league, my mom made it. And here again, I go back to average guys out in 3 years and broke. So it's like, how do we diversify different streams of income, right? How do we invest your money? And then here's another thing is a budget, because, if you've never had money, and all of us pay bills and have mortgages and stuff like that. If I get $1 million and go buy a chain and go buy a car and send my mom some money, I may have $100,000 until I get my next NIL check, right?
Yep.
So you have to understand, like in NFL now, these guys get around 64 checks. Used to 32 checks. Before, they used to get 17 checks. But the problem was, during the NFL season, once the season ended, they didn't get checks anymore. So you had 16 games back in the day and then one bye week. So they get a check every game. But when the season's over, they'd start calling, a lot of the different lenders or agents saying, hey, I need a loan. So we split their checks in half. so they can have to budget. So working with
Sure.
financial advisors, teaching them the budget, helping them with different streams of income off the field from a business, venture standpoint, things like that. It's not a one size fits all model. And then I'm gonna be honest, and I'm very, diplomatic as far as not talking about or naming guys like that. But every guy doesn't want to let some guys like, hey, this is my first time having money. Let
Sure.
me live. Let me enjoy my life. And that's the key word,
Yeah.
advisor. One thing I do want to kind of throw out there,
Sure.
from an agent perspective, it's a fire will business. Client can fire me at any time. I can
Mhm.
fire you at any time. But then, here again, I go back to what I just said is, do I have his ear and does he trust me? The other thing I did want to touch on, I know you had asked about the cognitive tests that they have at the combine. Honestly, I'm kind of split. I wasn't a great test taker for a long time until later in life, but I was very intelligent. I had to kind of work hard to achieve good grades, right? And some guys, they may not necessarily be Peyton Manning and very cerebral, from an X and the O's or academic standpoint, but they put the work and put the time in. So a test may not say,
Sure.
a guy who understand, logical reasoning, right? It may not show in the test because of the nerves of different things, right? However, what I will say is it does show, how do you perform under pressure? Did you take the test serious? Did you prepare? And then there's studies out there. I'm kind of 50-50 if there's cultural biases or not. But at the end of the day, here again, I would say with the cognitive test, it's just a data point, right? With all the different things we've talked about already, you got your on the field stuff, you got your college film, you got your character examinations, your background checks, your cognitive tests. So it's just another data point. But for me, here again, I'll tell you this as an agent, if I have a guy that may not necessarily perform that well, that's something we may talk about examining when he gets to the combine.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. And before I ask another question, I do see one from one of our viewers who's always here. We appreciate you, Ty Alexander. So can players actually make more in college with NIL than the NFL, especially if they're a future top draft pick?
So I'll baseline it, and I have to be careful from an NFL perspective, but everybody knows who the number one pick was last year in the draft. He played at Alabama, so I'll leave it at that. His signing bonus was roughly like $36 million guaranteed. College guys are not getting $36 million guaranteed. Here's what I mean by guaranteed. So the minute the first round pick last year got drafted, he walked across the stage and his agency could do his deal. That's $36 million, not in installments, went right to his bank account. It's his money.
Wow.
So just to kind of show you the scale. Now, do I think 5, 10, 15 years from now, could they potentially get close? Maybe. But my disposition is with NIL, I don't think a lot of your boosters and these corporations that start to back these players, at some point, there's something called a return on investment.
Yep.
Because you have 100 guys on the roster, maybe 10 guys are making big time money. But if I'm doing that year over year, then I'm doing it, and then you can appreciate this. Then I got recruits coming in. I got to shell out money too. At some point, it's like, we got to kind of get some balance and calibrate this NIL money because the business model doesn't make financial sense for the schools and the boosters. So I would say long term, probably not. But the guaranteed money for a rookie first round is probably around $20 million if you take the 32 picks. Second round, you're talking about probably about $10 to $15 million guaranteed. So I just don't see it because from a booster standpoint, a university standpoint, as those dollar signs keep going up, that bottom line from a profit margin is not going to make sense. And you have to do it year over year with recruits.
Yeah. And that's really good. And I think that NIL topic in and of itself is going to remain a big deal because there's a lot of things that weren't considered. But I like that we hit on the financial side of things because I definitely wanted to kind of piggyback off of that. That's something that I'm really into as far as like the different streams of income. And it's just so much out there, artwork, just so many options. But I do think that having that financial advisor is key. Now, since we're talking about that, I do want to ask you, I remember a couple years ago when Jalen Hurts, when he entered the draft and when he was working with his agent and just I was kind of following along with his journey. And I remember when you look at like the agent and then the different teams that are interested in that player, I kind of want to learn about like the contract negotiations in a sense. So like I remember with Jalen, there were certain teams that I guess expressed a little bit more interest in him. So like you had the Eagles, I think Doug Peterson was still there. And so it's almost like in the back of their minds, they already know of a couple teams that may be, interested in them. But when it comes to the contract negotiations, how does that look like? And you don't have to go into too much detail, but like from an agent perspective, and you have, let's say, a player, regardless of, I know you said that you tend to focus on like if you're going to be in the first or second round, essentially, otherwise you may need to go back to school. So let's say you have a guy who could go in the first or second round, and is it just a matter of there are certain teams that approach you about that specific player, or how do you like, what does that contract negotiation look like?
Okay. So here again, I'm big on education. So just the baseline, rookies don't have a lot of leverage because there's negotiations involved, but just to kind of educate and level set. So all rookie contracts, 4 years long, and we'll have an exam at the end of the show. I'm just kidding about that.
Yeah.
But all rookie contracts are 4 years long. That's number one. There's three parts to a contract financially, right? You have something called the signing bonus, right? That's, if you hear the word called guaranteed money, when you listen to the NFL Network and ESPN, all guaranteed money is the signing bonus. So that here again, when I use the example of the first round pick last year, I mean, he gets drafted and his team could do his deal, he gets that 30, 40 million immediately. That's the money year one. So signing bonus is one portion of the contract. You can do some negotiating on, but not really, because it's slotted. With the first pick is like 40 million. Pick number 2 is 39, and it goes down and down until you get to pick 32. So signing bonus is one piece. You have something called your base salary, like a regular job. So guys get roughly about 32 game checks. So, if a rookie's base salary is probably about $900,000. So you take that and divide it by 34. My math is terrible. You're probably talking about 40, 50 grand per paycheck. So you got your signing bonus, you got your base salary, and then they have something called performance incentives. Like if they have so many tackles in a season or touchdowns, they'll maybe get 100,000, $1 million. So that's important to know. So when you start talking about negotiating rookies, signing bonuses, can't really negotiate. They're pretty much slotted. You can negotiate more guaranteed money on their base salary, because here's what's important. In a NFL contract, this is for veterans too. Very first paragraph, it says, if you do anything to jeopardize you performing and fulfilling your obligations of an NFL contract, you will be cut, because most NFL salaries, not the signing bonus, is not guaranteed. So if they thought you weren't playing the best and they wanted to cut you in week 9, they could.
Now, is that on the field and off the field? Like when we hear about the guys getting tied into like the gambling and things like that? Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Player conduct, player conduct, things detriment to the team, getting injured, which I don't want to get too deep in injuries, but injuries, you can file grievances. It's not that easy to say, guy got hurt, we're going to let you go. But, there's a path if it doesn't work out, so you can negotiate, like somebody like Jalen Hurts, who was a high pick, guaranteeing his actual base salary. You can try to fight for 100%, 75%. The performance bonuses, like with Jalen Hurts, let's say, knowing if I represented him, and I think Nicole Lynn represents him, and she does a great job. Knowing him, if he's a rushing quarterback, I might say, hey, if he rushes for 10 touchdowns this year, we'd like to have a performance escalator where we get an extra bonus, right? So you're usually negotiating off of like your base salary and then some of those performance incentives with rookies. And then the other thing with rookies is after their third year, you can redo their deal. Or, if not, teams have like a 5th-year option. So those are some of the variables and terms that go into negotiating a contract for a rookie per se. And so here's the other thing. So agents' value is, or agencies is, in their influence and contacts with teams. We've had clients where we've had relationships with, the Patriots, the Eagles. I won't name the guy, but we had a guy a couple years ago, never was recruited by the Patriots. They never went to a game. They didn't work him out. They didn't talk to him in the combine. They ended up taking that guy in the second round. But we had a great relationship with the GM. We called. They had a need for the guy's actual position. He tested well. So in a sense, we kind of highlighted and illuminated his skill set and his prospects for that team. So ultimately, an agent or agency's value is in their relationships with teams as well. So that's another thing that agents do. You start talking about negotiating is like, if a team has a certain need, obviously, if they're interested, they're going to go get that guy. But it does help if I have a relationship as well.
Exactly. So it's not as cut and dry as it may seem on the outside looking in. I mean, it sounds like it's a lot of layers to it. And that's why, exactly. And that's why they need you all there. So that was an awesome answer. Now, what we can do for the sake of time, I'll pass it off to Dan and Hannah and let them ask the final question. And then we'll let you close, with whatever remarks you have. So Hannah, I'll send it over to you. So did you have any additional questions to ask?
Sure. If I can pivot just a little bit, because something you said earlier, I'm just going to piggyback off of, when you were talking about like players and, depending where they may be, you tell them to go back to school. I think probably the elephant in the room, so to speak, is Brock Purdy, right? Led his team to a Super Bowl, Mr. Irrelevant. He's probably catch one, whatever they say, catch all or catch one, whatever. What's the saying? Like, what's the lifetime? I think I want your opinion on him because I think he could have gone either way, right? He could have gone back to school and maybe had a stellar. You just never know because
Right.
some of these players are playing 72 years now. I mean, you look at Hunter Renfrow and some of these players they are still there. But when you look at a Brock Purdy, I mean, it worked out for him. But how rare is that? If you have a player that you're representing that they're like 5th, 6th, 7th round. I mean, it's hard.
So, I mean, finances unfortunately impact business. There's something in the financial world called risk or level of risk.
Mm-hmm.
So if a guy gets a 5th round projection, it doesn't mean he's going to get drafted in the 5th round.
Mm-hmm.
That just means where teams value your talent. But if those teams in the 5th round don't have a need for you or you didn't perform well, you could slide is where I'm trying to go. Because usually they say where you great at, there's a 2 to 3 round slide. So not a first round guy. We know all the studs. Your Will Anderson, your Bryce Jones. Those guys are different, right? But if I'm like a 3rd round guy, that's my talent value. Potentially, I can slide to the 5th round. I can slide to the 6th round, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why is that important? One is there's a big paycheck cut. Like so, a 3rd round guy, you're talking maybe somewhere around $5 million signing bonus, guaranteed money, kind of what I was talking about, right? That's 3rd round, right? Maybe $7 million. If I slide to the 5th or 6th, I'm talking about me getting a couple $100,000.
Yeah.
So if I'm a junior, and a lot of guys are so ambitious, because I need my chains, and I'm not talking about anybody in particular, or I'm ready to go now. I've been here at Bama for 3 years. They may bet on themselves, but at the same time, is it worth the risk? Is it worth a $5 million pay cut? Here's the other piece. So somebody who has a 5th round grade, there's only 7 rounds, right, in the draft. If I got a 5th round grade, what happens if I slide off the board? Now I didn't get drafted. I'm undrafted free agent. So now I might get a $10,000, $20,000 signing bonus, and I'm low in the pecking order to get cut. Because when everybody goes in the camp, the higher you're drafted, you're a little more protected for getting cut. But if I'm a 5th round guy and then I slid out of the draft, now I'm getting $10,000, $15,000 signing bonus, and my probability is a lot higher when I get cut and a lot higher I'm going to be out of the league in 3 years. So to answer your question, it goes back to the level of risk that player and his family is willing to accept. Ultimately, it is the player and family's decision. I've advised guys before to go back, and they came out, and vice versa. I've told guys, hey, I think you should go, and they went back. And they went. So, but you I go back to where I started this whole conversation is you take all those data points or those boxes you can check, and you talk to your school, you talk to your coaches, you talk to people outside, and you take an aggregate, and then you determine, your success based on, that data and that level of risk. The higher you grade it, the less risk, the higher the guaranteed signing bonus money, the longer your career is going to be. So it's not quite a science, but there's almost a formula to this.
Yeah.
And a lot of guys don't understand the business. They just get caught up in emotions and, getting a quick check.
But that should be a class, right, Spencer? Like, I mean, you would think that at school they should have like the business. I remember I took something like the business of engineering, and it wasn't a long, it was, I think, maybe 1 semester or something like that. But you get to learn the business side of things, and I think that would be that's fundamental, right? I mean, you're out there playing and you're practicing, but then surely the finish goal is, or the end goal is to get to the NFL. So you would think that would be a part of the curriculum. Maybe you can start something like that. I mean, I don't know. But it's definitely needed. That was awesome. And then Dan, did you have any additional questions?
It was a comment like similar. Brock Purdy. I'm thinking he exhausted all of his. I think he may have had a COVID year, but I think
Yeah.
that's what it was. But it's
I'm
like
just using him as an example.
Okay, makes sense.
So to answer your question about Brock, though, it is an interesting use case because he was in school with 4 or 5 years. So at that point, and then you get into, if I go back for my co-year, how much I'm really going to increase my stock?
Right.
Mhm.
That's what I was going to get it.
Yeah.
Right. If not, I got my master's degree
Sure.
because it's time to go to work. Right.
Yeah.
So that makes sense. Yep.
Yeah, gotcha.
But it's different. Like Stetson Bennett, he actually got a draft grade. You know what I'm saying? He wasn't gonna get his degree anyway. He stayed 3 more years. But
Right.
he got a draft grade, so that's why he was able to. He could have come back if he wanted to, but it was just being able to get drafted, go make a little money, or be a janitor somewhere. So it was a little
That's
different.
right.
He had already been there about 12 years anyway.
Yeah, he was working the system.
Yeah, he was. Okay, and then I think Justin had one more question, and then we'll.
Not a janitor, Dan. I'm going to take a little bit of a different direction just because of how crazy things are with NIL right now. You being fully immersed in the whole financial side, the pay structure of the NFL, the incentive-based contracts, and so on and so forth. The only reason I ask this is because there's no rhyme or reason behind anything we do as far as paying the athletes in terms of NIL. How well would the pay structuring in the NFL translate over to NIL, in your opinion? Because we need some kind of rules and regulations in place. Could necessarily what we see in the NFL be somewhat effective in terms of regulating NIL?
So, the only thing you get in the antitrust NFL, because, there's pundits out there feel like the NFL's already kind of monopolized, the football industry. But I do think the model, having a salary cap, just I think to your point, at some point, I believe the Big Ten and the SEC have an alliance. So I think, from a legislation standpoint, having some type of cap, because here, even in my business, right, this transfers over to the schools, it almost becomes a bidding war. I'm giving you insight into the agent business along with the collegiate world.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times when athletes make their decisions, and this is something I don't enjoy about my side of the business, who has the biggest check? Not, I feel like you're knowledgeable, I trust you, I've known you for 5 years, and I don't want to name any names. Agency ABC is offering $1 million. You guys are offering me $750,000. I'm going with $1 million. So let's take it back to the collegiate world, Justin. And getting back to your question, school ABC is offering NIL $2 million. This school out in California is offering $5 million. It's not about I like the program, I like the coach, so on and so forth. Right? It almost becomes a bidding war.
Yep.
And it takes the collegiate athlete. And the competitiveness and the sports and the universities out of it. So to answer your question, I think how the NFL model can be applied is having some type of cap, whether that's who has $10 million a year, use it wisely. Because now that almost like baselines and levels all the universities back out. So now if I'm a big 5-star prospect, now every school may not have $10 million, but we know all the big boy schools, if every school has a $10 million cap, now I'm going based on where I feel it meets my needs and my preferences, so on and so forth.
That's awesome. Well, since we're talking about finances now, I'm not gonna dive deep like on your side as an agent, but I am curious. So you kind of already laid it out as far as like the journey that you took to become an agent. So I would imagine there are people who, may be listening to this and they're like, okay, you know what? I'm not gonna ever play football, but I definitely could probably manage, someone in that aspect. So do you feel like, as far as from a financial perspective, is that something that's in your perspective, is it worth that journey? I mean, are you essentially taking like commission off of each guy that you represent who is that how that works? Commission based? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't want to I'll try to be short, but
no, you're good. You're good.
Part of the reason I'm here is, one, I never met an agent until I became an agent. Two is there's a lot of us that love sports, whether you do podcasts or broadcast journalism or agent. I just want people to know you still can be a pro, in football, basketball, but you might have to put a suit on. So becoming an agent is, number one, going back to how I started, you got to have your undergrad and you got to have your master's or your law degree, right? So once you do that, go take your test. Then great, welcome to the NFL. Nobody cares. You go to the back of the line, what the agent's been doing in a long time. I'm giving the raw behind the scenes. You don't have any money. You're not backed by a big agency. You're not signed a 5-star that played at Bama for 3 years. You're going to have to try to get a guy back of the draft or barely gets drafted, or hope somebody really likes you. And, agents, I can't technically throw out how much they make, but it's a small commission. So here's the other thing that I want, viewers to know. When a player signs with the agency or agent and you see them at these fancy training facilities, guess who pays for that?
The agent.
Agent or agency. And guess what that is on the balance sheet? It's a negative.
Yep,
Yes. If I'm with an agency and I don't have the money and they put the money up, let's just say, I'm just not arbitrarily, that training for a big time player, big time you costs $50,000 for the combine. Guess who has a negative on their commission balance sheet before they get a commission check? That player who's at that training facility, they need somewhere to stay. They need a rent a car. They need to travel to go see teams. They need to go home and see their mama, see their girlfriend. I need a chain. I need a draft outfit. So a top guy without, putting myself in a box could cost, $100,000 to a couple $100,000. So that is a minus on the balance sheet. However, now when you start dealing with bigger guys and you're a couple $100,000 in and, their signing bonuses in the millions, that's not a bad thing. But when you're new, you're dealing with 5th, 6th, 7th round guys who barely get drafted as a new agent. And every guy, here's what I will say to prospective agents, every guy, you better treat them like you're special because you work for them. Technically, you're their boss. You need to make them feel like they're big time. Now, they're going to feel like I want to go to the same training facilities as Will Anderson, but you sat on the bench backing Will Anderson up. And I'm not disrespecting anybody. So the level set with the guy who's maybe a late round guy, we need to find a training facility at your price point and the housing and those ancillary things. So, and I don't mind sharing my story because for me, I'm out here to inspire, folks who want to get into this business and change the narrative in our culture that you have to be on the field of court to be in the sports business. My first client, I probably spent $50,000 of my own money before I got with an agent. I didn't make a dime until 3 years in.
Oh, wow.
While still working a day job. So it's a lot of people think, it's like, oh, I get my agent license, I'm flying on jets and going to parties. You got to love it. You got to love it. And then as you work your way up, you can get picked up or you can get people to back you. Another thing I'll say real quick is a lot of people who are agents are attorneys, right? So you can be super smart, pass the exam, but can I go talk to Tyrone and his mama, in the hood? Or vice versa. I went to rural Mississippi to talk to people of a fair skin pigment, on their farm or ranch, earrings out, suit on. So do you have a personality where you can be genuine, adapt to different cultures, different, family makeups, situations? I mean, it's almost like being a lawyer, a counselor, an accountant, a big brother. I mean, it's not just, a lot of people think I'm gonna go get my paperwork and it's a grind. I love it.
Yeah, it sounds like a grind, but it definitely sounds like it pays off. But like you say, you have to love it. And, really with anything, that's what it is. But I think a lot of people, maybe they don't view agents as it's taking that long for that ROI to get, your upfront costs, return. I do see another comment from Ty. Man, I've learned a lot about the drafting process. Appreciate you, Spencer. See, it's I learned a lot. Spencer Charles is a very knowledgeable NFL agent. I knew they were going to love this. Now, I think and then Linda, Spencer, look, I was thinking about that as you were talking. I'm like, okay, we're going to have him back. Spencer, thank you so much for all the insight. I learned a lot. Your professionalism is on point. Roll Tide. Thank you, Linda. And then I think Hannah had another question, more on the funny side of things.
Yeah. And we should have him on definitely, like, as we get closer to the combine. You can kind of be like our little analyst. Okay, if you could pick one player in the history of Alabama football to represent, what player would it be?
Derek Thomas is my childhood hero growing up.
Oh man, yeah.
He was Jesus in cleats on the defense.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Look, it only took.
Well, he definitely knew how to lay hands.
Oh gosh.
No,
this was awesome. Yeah. This is okay. So then, look, we had other things that we were going to discuss, after our, but that can be saved because this was so much more valuable. I think that whether it's someone who's a player or they want to be an agent, I think just for the everyday football fan, this is something that we don't get the insight on. Now, I knew a few of these things, but some of it was pretty new. And it's just like, how would you learn this stuff? You know what I mean? And so I question if the actual schools, not even just D1 schools, but if they're actually preparing the guys to learn this side of things. Like, I understand they can't really communicate with agents too early on. Let's see. Okay, I was just looking at a comment. But no, this has been super valuable. So what we'll do for the sake of time, any final words, anything faced by Caleb, please come back. We'll definitely have to have you back. And you look really pretty in your profile picture too, by the way. And then Erica, my best friend, absolutely love this segment. Thank you so much for tuning in. Look, I knew that this was going to light it up. So we definitely have to have you back. Now, I do want to ask, if they're like players watching right now who are currently at Alabama or anywhere else, any final words that you have for them? Particularly the ones who are preparing for the draft.
Trust the process. Don't get caught up in your emotions. Look at all the information. I always say, don't step over dollars to pick up pennies. Think long term. That's the biggest thing. And I'll say this, love to come back, continue to, shed light just on the industry, the business behind sports. So I appreciate the opportunity. I had a great time and look forward to doing this again.
Awesome. Do you have any social media that you want to share or any shows or anything like that?
So my IG is Agent SC3. That's S is in Sam, C is in Charlie, number 3. I always say I'm a people person. So if you want to reach out, got questions about the sports business, I'm like here again. Now I make myself available. And then I'm with the Agency One Sports Management Group. You can Google us. That's Agency One Sports Management. We're based out of Fort Lauderdale. But excited, about working with you all in the future, and I've enjoyed myself this evening.
Awesome. Same. And it's agency and the number 1, not
That's
the
right.
word 1. Yeah.
One.
So it's a
That's
numerical.
Right.
Awesome. So this has been awesome. I think it's even more than what maybe the viewers bargained for. I'm sure they wanted to learn some stuff, but I think because you were able to kind of express more of like that human side and just really, kind of draw people in and let them know, like, from your perspective, this is what you've seen and this is what they, should look for. So this has been awesome. There was one thing we were talking about, former players, and, we talked about Tua. I know we talked about Jalen Hurts and some of the other guys, but one thing that, we wanted to bring up about Tua is that, we look at the history of Alabama, right? Hannah just asked you an awesome question about if you were an agent for any former players, who would you have chosen? You said Derek Thomas. Well, Joe Namath, who, everyone knows of him. He's still a pretty relevant face out there in the sports world. It was announced this week that Tua actually essentially surpassed him when it comes to the 2 Alabama quarterbacks who had the highest number of passing yards in an NFL season. So Tua actually broke Joe Namath's record, and I think that's awesome. I think that's something that's worth giving him accolades for. It kind of made me think about what you were saying earlier, where the guys are sitting down, the players are sitting down with the agents, and kind of you're looking at your contract and you're trying to see, like, okay, well, what individual items or what can I do on the field where I can get those bonus checks or get enough, what I mean? And so to me, something like this, I would imagine it has to mean something. You start breaking records and things like that. So who knows? Hopefully Tua got to cash out on that. I don't know. But I definitely want to thank you for joining us, Spencer. It's been awesome. And I really appreciate that you've been a loyal viewer and supporter of this channel. I know a lot of times you may not be in the live chat, which I don't blame you, because we got them haters in there, and I try not to pay attention to it, but I appreciate that you come here and you sit back and you really participate as far as just listening to what we have to say. And so it kind of seems like you've been here before, which I know you haven't, with your camera on, but I definitely want to thank you for being here. It's definitely been it's definitely been a pleasure to have you. We have a super chat from Ty Alexander showing love to my peeps. Really appreciate it. He's been loyal as well. So what we're going to do, we have one more thing that we want to touch on, but we're going to let you go. I don't want to keep you all night, but we definitely appreciate you. What I'll do, I'll contact you leading up to Combine, and then we'll see if you're available, and we'll try to get you back on.
Absolutely.
It was really interesting and entertaining. I feel like I learned so much.
Yeah.
That I didn't realize, like, even from a personal standpoint, like,
I'm here anytime. Use me as a resource. And then, CG, I will say I was concerned about you when all the players were hitting the transfer portal, because I think you were very hot. I didn't know if you were going to make it. But
I didn't know. I just had to pray, and I had to say, Lord, I know you wept. I'm about to weep too.
We
He
had,
had to prune the tree. He had to prune. We'll grow back stronger.
we had to cast out demons on this show, Spencer.
Oh,
We're gonna
I
catch you out in a
listened to
minute.
all the shows, so
I was mad at Coach Saban.
It was highly
Yeah.
entertaining. She became a TikTok and YouTube sensation during this period.
I remember the term "Don't make me go get ghetto." So I
Oh my
definitely remember.
gosh.
that's gonna be a T-shirt available at 8
Look, it could be. It might be. Well, no, this was definitely enjoyable. What was that, Hannah?
I was going to say on Saturday night, I heard Riley Gaines. She came and spoke in Alabama, and she said when Nick Saban retired, she opened her phone, and she said all she saw was pictures and crying eyes of Nick Saban. She didn't thought he died. She was trying to open ESPN, and she said, well, I guess for y'all Bama fans, it's kind of like you did.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Spencer, I don't want to keep you on. You can definitely feel free to stay, or you could drop if you want, whatever you'd like to do. We had one more topic that we wanted to touch on, so
Yeah, I'm gonna transition off. I actually got to pick my daughter up, but thank y'all, and I look forward to being back.
Awesome.
Thank you, buddy.
Well, thank you. You have a blessed night, and we'll talk soon.
All right.
Thank you. All right. So hopefully, I know that y'all probably have enjoyed this as much as we have. It's been very informative. I feel like these are the conversations that you kind of hear about in passing, maybe when you talk to a guy who's gone through the process. So Ty Alexander, even Spencer heard the rant. So y'all gonna leave me alone about the rant. See, that's why I haven't ranted in a while, just because I know y'all look forward to that, and I'm just not gonna do that. But I wanted to quickly
I'm actually glad that we ran out of time, Cece, because there was a little comment made on the Paul Feinbaum show earlier that definitely would have had you on fire.
Well, we're not going to touch on that tonight.
You do her.
No. So I know, look, we're a little past the hour. However, I wanted to quickly mention some of our other sports. I know a lot of times we put a lot of emphasis on football, rightfully so, but there were a few that I wanted to mention, and then I'm going to allow Hannah and Dan to maybe mention something that stood out to them really quickly. Men's basketball, y'all, we pretty much mollywopped Texas A&M 100-75. That was really awesome. We had Coach Saban in the building and Mrs. Terry, and so I think that was awesome that they were not only present there, but they actually spoke to the team prior to the game. And essentially it sounded like, he pretty much motivated them, helped them to remember just, the importance of discipline and being determined and all that good stuff. So hopefully we see Coach Saban out, as we prepare for our football season. He's out there, motivating the guys. Women's basketball, we beat Auburn, which we typically do, but we beat Auburn at home. So we have enough.
Chris.
Huh?
Say it again for Chris Williams in the chat. Who
Oh, he's here again? I told y'all, I think he's really a fan. He has that Auburn. You should have asked him about Auburn if you wanted to. I mean, we talk about Auburn now. We're talking about how our women's basketball team just.
He's like a pig that keeps returning to his own poop.
Let me get him. Let me give him one.
Yeah, how about you get him, Dan? Then I'll kind of pick it back.
Chris, man, let me tell you this, man. We're talking about the NFL combine. We're not talking about the CFL combine.
Nothing that they got to worry about.
So, yeah.
But you know what, though? They actually took another loss on top of that women's basketball because the guy Keon Saab, the one that transferred from Michigan to Alabama, now Auburn was going after him. He's a safety with Michigan. This guy is elite. And when he entered the transfer portal, Georgia was barking down his bag, Auburn. But we already knew that Auburn, their name doesn't even hold weight. So that was just another L, just like they took that L with Ryan Williams. So this is why he's here, guys. He has literally nothing better to do than to watch us. They're not talking about anything. They don't have any shows. So we appreciate it. You have this picture of Cam Newton. That was 2010. Like you're living at 14 years. Dude, just have you a blessed night. However, before we move on, because I know that we're kind of pushing towards time, I definitely wanted to shout out our women's basketball. We beat Auburn. Our next game is tomorrow against South Carolina. Baseball. Now we're ranked number 17 in baseball. Our guys have been awesome. And actually our pitcher, Alton Davis II, he actually made his debut. I think it was a strikeout of 3 different players. He's been added to the 2024 Stopper of the Year watch list. And he's also a southpaw, and I have to shout out southpaws like Tua as well because I'm left-handed as well, so I always have to just kind of shine some light on them. And then of course softball, we've been dominating. I'm so proud of our teams collectively. Now Hannah, I want to ask you, I just mentioned a few, are there any of our sports that stood out to you this week or as of late?
Sure. Alabama softball. 11-0 beat UNA tonight or this afternoon in Tuscaloosa, 9-1, 6 innings. I am so excited. I think I mentioned this, I think last week, but and I'll say this, Caleb Rowe was probably the best hire the University of Alabama has had in the last couple of years. I will say this because since Caleb Rowe and Jen Finn, I don't know, I'm a huge softball fan, but when I was in school, we had slap hitters up front and power hitters in the middle. So you had like Amanda Locke, you had Jackie Traina, you had Courtney Connolly who could hit grand slams. You had Jen Finn and Caleb Rowe who are fast and slap hit and get on base. The problem with Alabama softball is they've not been able to hit the ball, and you have to hit the ball to get runs. So we've struggled going in the Women's College World Series, playing teams like Oklahoma, UCLA, all these programs that are power hitters and they're good. We're finally getting the hits we need to get. And I will tell you, Caleb Rowe is a huge part of that success. And I think Alabama softball is going to win national championship this year. I'm here for
All right. Look, y'all heard Hannah say it. I don't see why we wouldn't be, but y'all heard it from Hannah first. So no, I like that. Dan, anyone that you wanted to, any sport that you wanted to shout out?
Yeah, definitely. Basketball. You know, we're still in first place. You know, we got a big game tonight. I think we're trailing at halftime. The Florida, I think at halftime. But hey, you know, we after the show, y'all get on and pull us through.
Pull us through. Well, we see that you're decked out, so you're ready for the game. Now, we're going to come to a close. I know that we're a little bit past what we normally go, but, you know, we appreciate y'all who are still on. So I definitely wanted to just thank everyone who's watched tonight. Be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you don't miss a video because we always have new content coming out. So we definitely want to just say thank you for joining tonight. And I want to give you all a chance to pop your social media. So, Hannah, do you want to share any socials that you have or any shows?
Sure. So you can follow me on Facebook, Hannah Stevens, UA Sign Girl. You can follow me on Twitter at the UA Sign Girl. I'm kind of feisty to sign on Twitter, so maybe wait till tomorrow. Instagram is, I think, at the Hannah Stevens. And yeah, so just a lot going on. But social media has kind of been my main thing right now. So, you know, I don't want to take it, but yeah.
No, you're good. You're good. And then Dan, did you have any socials that you want to share?
Definitely. You know, you can catch me on Twitter at Final Whistle Dan. You catch me on Instagram, Dan James IV. Catch me Tuesday nights on this very same channel, The Final Whistle. Awesome cast. And Wednesday nights, hey.
Wednesday night, look. It's the place to be. It's the place to be. I mean, honestly, you can go to Bible study or you can come here.
That's right.
I would say go to Bible
study.
Or you
could come here and go to Bible study.
You could do that too, depending on your time. Look, depending on your time zone. Well, I want to thank everyone.
Watch us doing Bible study.
You could. Look, they might have to pray over you, though. They're going to think something wrong. Well, I definitely want to thank all of our viewers. My Instagram is at beauty_of_intelligence. I know it's kind of long, but, you know, that's what it is. So you can find me there. I'm not planning to change it anytime soon. So I definitely want to thank everyone who's tuned in. Thank you for the super chats. Thank you for being active in the live chat. We always appreciate that, including the Auburn fan who seemed to secretly love Alabama. So we appreciate you as well. So y'all have a blessed night. Be sure to follow the Bama Standard on Instagram, Twitter, or X, Facebook, everything else. And y'all have a great night. And be sure to tune in next week, same time, same place. Roll Tide Roll.
Roll Tide Roll.